Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here to talk about the new romantic action comedy Fall Guy. I've seen it, so let's talk about it. So, kind of as evident, by the seemingly endless parade of annual award shows, Hollywood is rarely shy to celebrate itself, and I do think movies about movie making do have the potential to just come across as somewhat pretentious or just self-indulgent. But I think by shining a light sort of on some of the industry's most unsung heroes, Fall Guy mostly avoids any of those pitfalls because I actually really enjoyed this movie. This was a movie that from the trailers, I figured I could go either way on this. Either I'm gonna, really not like what's happening, some of the humor, or this could just be something that's really fun. And I'm glad to say that, coming out of the theater, I did land in that second category, which, this is a movie that has two very charismatic leads. I think it has a ton of fresh ideas and just plenty, kind of enough effectively funny gags that Fall Guy is just a very energetic, effective comedy that does also serve as a very clear, sort of heartfelt love letter just to cinema. So for a film that is about, kind of Hollywood's unsung heroes, I almost feel guilty to begin this review by talking about the movie's star power, but Fall Guy really does succeed largely due to the performances of its two-star leads. Kind of fresh off of his sort of buzzworthy performance as Ken in the Barbie movie, Ryan Gosling once again just proves that he is a wagon filmmakers can kind of hitch themselves onto. And obviously, this isn't the type of film that really, requires, thespian acting in any way. But Gosling does showcase in this just that he does have incredible range. He can pull off sort of the dramatic moments when they come. He can hold his own in like the action sequences. But probably most impressively is this that he has excellent comedic timing really all throughout this movie. And the same can be said about Emily Blunt, who I've always enjoyed as an actress. She is great in this film as well, although she isn't given quite as much of, just the media material to allow herself to shine. But kind of the two of them together, they just have this magnetic chemistry with each other. And I do think, at least for me, I appreciated that the filmmakers, they don't force a whole bunch of like unnecessary or like contrived obstacles in the way of sort of this rekindled romance between those two characters. I think kind of despite a very intentionally like playful tone, there is almost a surprising amount of like maturity to the romance between these two characters that does feel more grounded than you typically get in these sort of fun romantic comedy films where they do sort of work out their relational drama and issues kind of as adults. And kind of with those two captivating leads, sort of the movie surrounding them really only just needs to be passable for this movie to work. And I think this movie more than clears that very low bar because this is a movie that is just bursting with a lot of originality, a lot of fresh ideas. It's kind of the movie that you can just sort of tell from watching that everyone involved in making this movie is just having an absolute blast, like on set making the film. And I think that positive energy just becomes contagious. There's just a lot of clever things going on with this movie. Kind of the narrative, kind of the mechanism of like making a film about characters who are making a film allows for a lot of fun kind of winks and nods at the audience without ever sort of, feeling like an overused gimmick. For example, there's a moment where characters are Gosling and Emily Blunt's character are sort of debating like the effectiveness in cinema of using like a split screen. And obviously while they're doing that, they are in a split screen, kind of living out the things that they're talking about. Or later, Colt, who is Ryan Gosling's character, kind of chides the bad guys, like, for acting like James Bond villains, and he kind of interrupts like a lengthy villain monologue to explain how, in films, the third act often gets, bogged down, kind of drowned in just way too much exposition, and then they move straight on to the action scene, and just a lot of fun kind of tongue-in-cheek moments, or even like there's a lengthy gag where Colt has been drugged, and he's told that the effects will only wear off when he stops seeing a unicorn. And then for the next like several sequences, there's just sort of this white unicorn sort of unceremoniously just like hanging out in the back of these scenes. And the camera never like draws a whole lot of attention to it, but obviously you notice it every time. And it's sort of like the comedy beats like that like obviously aren't necessarily subtle in any way, but they never feel like forced or just too heavy-handed. And just tonally, this film felt similar to me to Gosling's previous film, Barbie. And in fact, like, as someone that wasn't necessarily crazy about the Barbie movie, I do think Fall Guy kind of better utilizes its kind of fun, playful tone. Because like right from the opening moments of this film, it is very clear that it's not going to take itself very seriously at all. But kind of with one or two exceptions, it never devolves into like a spoof. It sort of kind of dances along the line of like just being like dumb fun without ever like treating the audience as though they are unintelligent. And while I liked a lot of things going on in this movie, it isn't a movie that is without faults. I think the script does become kind of increasingly convoluted, and at least for me, I felt like by the end of this 2+ hour runtime, it does begin to sort of overstay its welcome and just drag on a bit too long. And there's just a lot of like what I would call like MacGuffin chasing in this movie, where like characters are sort of on this wild goose chase to like track down this character or this important piece of information, only to be told that they don't actually have the answer and they need to find this person. And so they find this person, and then that person, has an object that only this person can crack the code of, and just a lot of sort of going back and forth and kind of keeping characters busy. And obviously, I think these kind of detours clearly are meant just to serve as like excuses to put these characters into a bunch of fun and kind of zany, wild situations. And because sort of the resulting situations are fun, I think kind of the convolutedness of the script does become just sort of a minor gripe. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of this film, there's really not a whole lot. Where there is the most content is with the language. I counted kind of one F-bomb, as well as kind of frequent uses of other profane words, mostly starting with the letter S, and also several in one scene kind of using the P word, as well as there is a handful of times where like God or Jesus, kind of their names get used as curses. As far as violence, there's really not like there's a lot of action, but not necessarily anything violent, or at least not like gratuitous. Where there is, fights and action where like characters' faces kind of get bloodied, and there's gunfire and some of that, but really little, if any, like actual death or like anything concerning in that way. And sexuality, really nothing here. Either there is a character that makes sort of an unintended comment to his former lover that she looks good in anything she wears, and she also looks good in nothing. And kind of, that same woman later kind of recounts a period in her life where she's rebounding from a broken relationship, where she sort of went through a bunch of different, men and lovers, and kind of describes it like kind of going through like a sushi line with very clear, like, sexual intentions. And there is sort of one other, like, kind of decide used for kind of comedic effect of a man who begins to confess that he fell in love with his wife's sister, although he gets cut off and never finishes that story. And just the only other kind of content stuff is there is sort of some drug use and kind of alcohol use at various points throughout. As far as themes, kind of messages, things going on beneath the surface of this film, I think there are several layers to this. I think the most immediate kind of theme is that this movie very much is created to and intended to be sort of like a commentary on just the film industry. It kind of playfully pokes fun at a lot of the stereotypical like tendencies of pampered actors and kind of some of these like producers and just some of that kind of movie making culture. But I think kind of maybe more importantly is that it also just kind of lovingly celebrates some of kind of Hollywood, the industry's kind of most underappreciated people. Because this movie, it does give sort of the typically anonymous like Hollywood stunt crews their day in the sun. And even like when this movie ends, like the end credits are playing, there is like a bunch of reels and stuff showing like the stunt people at work on Fall Guy itself, and just kind of celebrating like the real life stunt people involved in the process as well. And well, really the primary focus is centered specifically on cinema and like the entertainment industry. I think the theme does have wider application just to people outside of the industry, because really at its core, I think Fall Guy is about recognizing and appreciating just sort of the unsung heroes in our own lives. And it kind of reminds all of us just to not become like distracted, kind of blinded by the glitz and the glamour or the fame or like influence, but to see the value and the talents and this like the potential of the various people that do sort of operate like on the sidelines or just outside of the spotlight. And obviously as Christians, that is something that we can affirm. The Bible frequently urges Christians to not view people through sort of superficial, like earthly qualities, but to instead sort of see everyone as, treat them all equally, with love and respect as people that are created by and, made in the image of God. And even like maybe more specific for like the context of like the church, I think this film is also just a reminder that like all members are called to play a very valuable role, and like that those that contribute, maybe more unsung, like, more anonymously behind the scenes rather than being like visible on the stage, also have a very crucial and important contribution to make to like the mission and like, to the community. So in the end, I actually enjoyed this movie quite a bit. It is sort of like an original and I think effective Hollywood comedy, which just seems to be more and more rare to get these types of films in theaters anymore. I think notably too, like outside of the profanity, which again there is a fair amount of profanity. Kind of the PG-13 movie is relatively kind of clean in all the other regards, and just sort of proves that like not all Hollywood comedies have to be of like the raunchy variety. But I think especially fans of like cinema are going to enjoy this movie for all like the self-referential like nods to the audience and to the industry. But I do think thanks to two very capable stars and just some clever direction and interesting ideas, there's definitely enough here just to entertain kind of general audiences as well. But hey, if you guys check out this movie, I'd love to hear what you think. So don't be shy, jump in the comment section. Let's have a conversation about this. And if you haven't done so too, encourage you guys, subscribe to the channel, become a collider. We got movie reviews and a podcast and interviews and just a bunch of fun stuff. Would love to have you be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thanks for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide through your world for Christ.